ask him. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to use the microphone a little bit. Again, I see a lot of familiar faces in the audience, so thank you for coming. I'm Dr. Bill White. I'm the superintendent of the school district. With me is Jennifer Frederick. She's our school business manager. We have two of our board members up front here tonight, Mr. Jack Lothian and Mr. Mark Schneider. So thank you for coming, both of you. We're going to basically give you a brief overview of the referendum. And basically, people want to know really four key pieces. One, what are you asking for? So what's the referendum question? And part of that really is the why. And then the third piece is what's the impact on my tax bill? People really want to understand that. And then the final thing people want to understand is what happens if it doesn't pass? What's the impact on the school district? So we're going to really work through that, those four questions as we work through the presentation tonight. When we're finished, happy to take any questions you have and answer anything you may want to pose. So we'll just go from there, okay? I'm first going to let Jennifer start off.
Sure. Again, thank you so much for being here. I'm Jennifer Frederick, the business manager, as Dr. White said. On Tuesday, April 2nd, we're asking the public, the Williams Bay School District community, which is comprised of 5 municipalities, to allow us to exceed the state-imposed revenue limit by 1.25, 1.5, and 1.75 million over the next 3 years. The three key takeaways here are that this is not for increased spending. It's not an additional 1.25 million. It's replacing what will otherwise be lost, which I'll talk about in a minute. We do not project that this will increase property taxes. The mill rate is projected to go down even with a passed referendum. And that is mostly because we're asking for about the same amount that we've received in the last 4 years. Again, I'll go over that in a moment as well. But you can think of school districts as being on a fixed income. Every single year, we levy the maximum that we're allowed to by the state's funding formula. So that amount tells us exactly what budget we'll be working with in the next year. We're unique in Williams Bay and really the Lake Geneva area as well in that we have high property values. That actually does not allow us to receive equalization aid, which is one of the largest revenue sources for most school districts in the state of Wisconsin. School districts, even 15 or 20 minutes from here, receive tens of millions of dollars. We get $9,000. So the funding formula is our primary regulator on our revenue source. 73% of our revenue comes from property taxes. So when the funding formula lowers how much we're allowed to levy from our taxpayers, obviously that has a huge impact on our revenue, on our budget, because we don't have additional sources like equalization aid, like most school districts. The funding formula is based off of membership, not enrollment. So we get our funding level set by the state based on how many school-aged children live in our boundaries, again, 5 municipalities, that attend a public school. It doesn't matter if they attend Williams Bay or if they choose to open enroll elsewhere. Our funding is still set at the same amount based on how many resident students attending public school live in our boundaries. Over the past 4 years, we've seen about 200 less students living in the Williams Bay community. Some reasons for that, obviously, the home values have gone up in the last few years, but several years as well. Birth rates statewide and nationwide are declining. We're seeing substantially less kindergartners coming in as seniors leaving. So we're not able to keep up with that same enrollment piece. But again, there we're talking about enrollment. Here we're talking about residents, students living within our district.
The funding formula was put in place in 1993 by Governor Tommy Thompson. At that time, when they put that in place, they kept school funding even with the cost of inflation. They call it CPI. That stayed in place until 2009. In 2009, the legislature stopped doing that. They started just making those adjustments based on figures they decided to do through the legislature. So the last biennial budget before this one, they gave a $0 increase to schools. The past one gave $325 to school districts, and that has different impacts on us as schools. So, but since 2009, what you've seen is a really great increase in the number of referendums that schools are having to undergo. A large part of that is the state legislature and the governors have really believed that schools are locally funded and operated. They're controlled by the local taxpayer. So ultimately, they're shifting that tax burden back to the local taxpayer and saying, if you want to give your schools more taxing authority, then you approve that through a referendum. Henceforth, you're seeing more and more referendums, and why we're at that stage right now.
So in the past 4 years, like I said, we've been operating within about a $10 million revenue. We did increase taxes the 1 year to cover defeasance, which is paying debt off early. That saved us $700,000 in interest costs. We did that in order to be able to make sure our debt payments are covered should this referendum fail. So that is where you see the 1 year spike there. But again, that section was solely for debt. So if you look beyond that, we've operated right around 10 million. Again, because of a lack of per pupil funding to support, inflation and additional costs of serving these pupils, that combined with 200 less pupils living in our district, we're seeing the fiscal cliff finally arrive here in 24-25. Again, school districts all across the state are seeing this. We did have ESSER funding, which was COVID relief money. The state legislature decided not to increase per pupil spending for those 2 years because we had ESSER funding available. The ESSER funding was initially meant for one-time upgrades like HVAC handling, masks, sanitization, that kind of thing related to COVID. But it ended up being used in the last 2 years of really helping school districts continue operations as is. It's been a plug for continuous costs, not one-time costs, because of the lack of funding from the state. So what we're asking of the taxpayers or voters to allow us to do is, instead of seeing that huge drop in how much we're allowed to levy from our taxpayers, we're hoping to just keep that relatively flat around that $10 million sweet spot. So in lieu of seeing that drop, the mill rate will continue to drop here. I'll talk about it in a moment, but we're really just asking for continued funding, not additional spending, continued funding from what you've spent.
Again, as Jennifer's talked, we're trying to maintain the budget right around that 10 million. As you've seen over the last few years, we've had tremendous inflation. So we've seen our costs greatly increase. You see that as a homeowner with your utility bills, your cost of food, your cost of insurance, all those things, and the school district certainly has experienced that. In that same period of time, we've seen a decline in the pool of candidates for teaching positions. So the competition for employees is pretty crazy. As you guys have made, or if you own your own business or you're out there as a person working, you see that same thing in other sectors. So certainly those factors have driven up our costs, but yet we've managed to contain those as much as we can and remain around that 10 million by reducing positions. So we reduced about 9 certified positions since the 2020-21 school year, and we continue to reduce. So even without the referendum, the board has already planned to reduce about $250,000 to $300,000 in spending for next year. That includes eliminating positions as people have retired and those kinds of things. So we adjusted to that declining enrollment, but again, we can only adjust so far so quickly. Just as if you'd have a child move out of your house, it doesn't just completely erase all the costs that maybe were associated with that child, so things get spread. So we still see that deficit in our budget.
So the big question is, how will this look on my tax bill? Again, last year the mill rate was a little higher for paying off debt service, so it was $731 per 100,000 of home value. The mill rate this year was $514. If the referendum fails, your mill rate will drop to $385 by year 3. That creates a $1.1 to $1.7 almost $1 million deficit for the district. If the referendum passes, you'll see the mill rate still drops, but only from 514 to 462. This is still a $52 per 100,000 value of home savings from this year's taxes. But again, you are giving up some tax relief if you were to vote yes in this referendum. So what does this look like? We found a $350,000 home in Williams Bay that paid $1,800 this year for the taxes for 2023. If the mill rate, if the referendum fails, their taxes will drop from $1,800 to $1,348. Again, if it passes, it'll still drop, but only to $1,617. So just wanted to give an example there of what that would look like. So how can taxes go down if we're asking for $1.25 million more? Again, it's not $1.25 million more than last year. It's that $1.25 million brings us to the same amount as last year. So if we're levying about the same amount as last year, and we're seeing continued growth in our community with new homes, new construction, the mill rate will therefore decline because there's more people splitting the $10 million bill. So 2 years ago, Williams Bay School District boundaries, again, not just the village, but all 5 municipalities, we saw a 16% increase in growth. This year, we had 22% increase in our equalized value. So with that thankful growth that we have, that allows more taxpayers to pay that $10 million bill, resulting in everyone's share being less. As Dr. White said, we're not the only one going to referendum. If you drive into Walworth or Lake Geneva, you'll see yard signs, just like you're hopefully seeing them around Williams Bay. We are joining 69 school districts across the state. Those are just who have registered to be on the ballot for February or April. This does not include what we anticipate for November, which will continue to grow as that's a large election as well. And then in the last 2 years, we've had 146 operational referendums throughout the state. So again, as Dr. White said, we've talked to the state legislature, Tyler August. They said they are very aware of this issue. They understand that changing the funding formula at the state level will create winners and losers across the state. He said there's not enough support to change the formula in a way that would help rural, high-valued districts like us, which is why they anticipate that they prefer that local taxpayers choose what the funding level is for the school. So as such, you can see all these schools immediately around the area that have already gone to referendum or are joining us in April. So it's definitely a statewide issue, has nothing to do with how we're managing our funds. Obviously, how many school-age children living in the district is also out of our control. It's solely based on this funding formula set by state policy.
So what happens if the referendum doesn't pass? Well, first we need to talk about what the school district has been over the history of its existence in our community. The Williams Bay School District has been a central point of this community. It's about educating kids, but it's also about giving back to the community. Again, the school district belongs to you as the taxpayer. But our kids have had a tremendous education over the years. Some of you have had children that have gone through here or grandchildren. You've seen the quality of the education they've been provided. Our students have access to a very personalized instruction in a very safe and secure environment. So at our elementary level, our kids get to work in small classrooms with fewer kids. They get a lot of attention from their teacher. They get a lot of support across the entire school. When they get to the high school level, certainly they have a very rich academic environment. They get to take a lot of AP courses. They get to take college credits and earn credit through Gateway, through W. Whitewater. They have access to virtual courses. We want our students in Williams Bay to be able to get access to any course they could if they went to a larger high school in suburban Chicago or around us. So again, they can pretty much get any course they want. It may not be face-to-face, but they have access to those classes. They have access to a wide variety of co-curricular and sports activities. So we have 9 varsity sports. Some of those we share with other schools. We do a lot of co-oping. Those include, basketball, baseball, hockey, gymnastics. So our kids pretty much have an access to a very rich array of programming for them. About 20% of our kids go to Madison every year, and we have graduates who've gone to Cornell, Yale, Swarthmore, Stanford. So again, our kids are leaving here highly, highly prepared for wherever they may go in their academic career. We believe our students are the most well-rounded students in the state of Wisconsin, if not nationally. Why? Well, you see this picture of these two young ladies. They are co-scholarship winners. They give out 100 of those a year, and they're given out to students that are very, very well-rounded. They have to have a high academic achievement. And again, these kids are scoring really well in the ACT. Again, they have rich coursework behind them, and they're academically prepared to go and be successful in college. They're involved in lots of things. Students here can be on the basketball team, in the musical, in the marching band. They can do it all. We don't cut, and we arrange it so the kids can participate in all those activities so they get an opportunity to, again, become very well-rounded in their co-curriculars. Through all that, they get strong leadership experience. And our kids not only lead in school, but they lead in the community. They're involved in the different organizations throughout the community. They're giving back. And that's the final part, is really being giving back through community service. And as you know, the students in our school, they're required as a part of their graduation to do community service. We go out and do projects in the community in the fall of the year, and they're doing lots of different things that give back to the community. So ultimately, we're preparing our kids for a very rich future. College and career ready, we're really focused on that. So again, the other part of this funding is really for our staff. This district has enjoyed a very dedicated employees over the years. They come, they stay 20, 30, 40 years. We've seen the average tenure of our teachers drop in the last 3 years from 14 to 9. We've been very blessed to have people like Mrs. Planda, Mrs. Hopkins sitting in the back, Darla Thiel, Toby Spot. Again, you can name those people. A lot of you know them. They lived in the community. They're involved in the community. They're giving back. We're really struggling with maintaining that because of salaries. So the next slide is, about the average tenure and trying to retain those employees. So a big part of the referendum is to make sure we're compensating our employees appropriately. A new teacher in the Williams Bay School District without any experience starts off at $42,000. The livable wage in the state of Wisconsin for a single person is $53,000. It takes most of our teachers 5 to 10 years to get to that level of compensation. So, and the board has done a good job trying to keep our staff competitive, but 2 years ago, CPI was 4.8%. They gave a 4% raise, because that's what would fit in the budget. Last year's CPI was 8%. They gave a 4% raise. So we've been lagging behind. We're the lowest paying K-12 district in Walworth County. So again, the big part of what we're trying to do with the Referendum 2 is to maintain that competitive compensation for our employees so we can retain them. We have really struggled with that the last few years. We're starting to see young people leave the profession because, again, there's better paying jobs out there, or again, looking at other districts, and that's sort of how right now in today's market you get a nice pay raise is to go out and get a job in another district and see if we'll match it or if they'll just keep going higher. So without the referendum, you're going to see two things. One, you're going to see an impact on the programs we talked about. We're going to see higher class sizes. The board is going to do that. Again, they've already eliminated positions. We'll continue to eliminate positions. We will, again, increase the class size. We will eliminate some programming. So we have classes sometimes that run with smaller class sizes for those AP courses and things like that. We just won't be able to run classes unless there's a certain number of kids in those classes. You'll see a reduction in some of our co-curricular offerings. And again, so you'll see just a reduction in staff, so less people, less ability to have that personalized instruction. On the teacher side, again, we'll see that reduction in staff. We'll see that continued struggle with compensation. We'll also have to look at some of our benefits and reducing those benefits because, again, that's a big cost in a business of our nature. And so we'll continue to see our inability to retain those teachers, and we'll also have to reduce their supply budgets. So without maintaining that funding level to where it is currently at, you will see some of those things start to be reduced.
So just as a reminder, this is the exact question on the ballot, April 2nd, is that 1.25 million, 1.5 million, and 1.75 million over the next 3 years. That's a 3-year Band-Aid. It's not a solution to the funding formula issue, but it does get us through the next biennial budget where we can kind of see if anything changes at the state level. We thought it was long-term enough where we can make some plans for our students and for our staff, but short-term enough that we remain flexible if anything changes outside of our control. Also, this is the maximum that, if you pass it, this is the maximum that we would be allowed to levy. If the district continues to, if we see more student-age children coming into the district or any other factors changing our budget, we're not required to levy that full maximum amount. We can levy anywhere below that. So this is just, again, instead of the limit from the funding formula being here, you're keeping us here, but we'll always, levy what we need and not more than that. So the big takeaway here too is April 2nd, again, is Election Day. This is our first day back to school after spring break. So we just want to remind parents and families that might be leaving for spring break to make sure that you can actually start voting absentee tomorrow at your village clerk's or town clerk's office using an absentee ballot. But you can vote in person anytime between now and I believe it's March 29th before the election if you want to skip the lines. So that's what's going to be on the ballot.
Questions? Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
So since COVID, like you said, you just said that the growth rate of enrollment is from 20%. Conversely, how is the enrollment, school enrollment? Is it growing or is it declining?
Yeah. So again, the enrollment is. I'll repeat it, then I'll give it next piece of the mic. So the question is enrollment declining? During that first year of COVID, we saw a decline in 80 students. And since then, we've seen it go down about 20 kids each year. We're graduating around 50 kids, and we have about 40 some kids, right around 40 coming into the 4K, 5K area. As you've seen over the last few years, there is some building, so property value is going up, and there is some construction in Williams Bay. But from what we understand from the village trustees and those, a lot of those homes are being bought by retirees. So again, we do have less kids in the village. And again, some people would ask, well, are they leaving and going to other high schools or other schools? Because they can through open enrollment. We still see a lot of open enrollment coming in. We can bring in about $1 million a year in revenues for open enrollment. So we see a far more number of kids coming into the district than going out. But again, this formula that Jennifer keeps talking about, that's based on resident kids that attend public school regardless of where they go to public school. No, that's what we're here for.
And certainly, the teachers need a raise. Based on what you just said, I totally support that. So, of this money, what percentage is going toward teachers' salaries, or is there also a serious building structure issue, or how's that money percent-wise?
Yeah, how's the money being divided up? Well, that's a hard question. About 70% of our budget is staffing. So we have budgeted about $200,000 for potential meeting the CPI, those inflationary increases. So I don't know if you have a firm percentage, but we built the different projects for maintaining the facility into our budget. So those are we plan for them. And so they're sitting there. They might get deferred. Do you have a percentage, though?
I don't have a percentage, but just to kind of, I assume you're looking at the same puzzle pieces with this, is how are we levying the same amount, but giving more to our teachers? One of the pieces of that is we have debt falling off next year. This was the final payment, and it was about $400,000 a year in principal and interest. So we want to repurpose that to be towards salaries. So that allows us to kind of operate within that pocket of money. But again, how school funding is separated, we cannot repurpose debt money. That's in a separate fund. It is outside the funding formula. We can't just reuse that money without voter approval. So that's worked into the $1.25 million that we're asking for.
Hey, thank you for the microphone. Yeah, first for your numbers, the Bureau of Educational Statistics is out there. I was asked some questions a few months ago. Did some research, found out that about 2/3 of every dollar we spend is going to staff here at Williams Bay Elementary School. My question was actually to Dr. White. I know you guys have been going on these presentations to different groups in the community, and here we all have kids in the school. We all want to see the school maintain well funding and small class sizes. Have you found groups of people that may be, without naming which groups they are, have you found areas of opposition? I'd imagine that people who would be against tax raises would be people with rental properties, that type of thing.
No, surprisingly, we haven't heard great amounts of opposition. We certainly know there are people out there that would like to maintain their taxes as low as they can. And we've heard some rumblings on Facebook. Some of them we know and know why that they're maybe not happy. But again, really there hasn't been tremendous upheaval from the public regarding it. As I looked at some of the school districts that I know that went to referendum in February, it was pretty nasty. Lots of misinformation and lots of accusations. We've been very blessed, Jennifer and I, to be out here speaking to the Williams Bay public, and people are being very respectful and really just trying to gather the information so they can make an informed vote. So we respect that, we appreciate that, we understand that people are going to vote different ways. But again, in the end, to me, again, the school district's a part of the community. This district has worked really hard to give back to the community and be a part of that fabric of the community. I've talked about earlier in the presentation, our kids going out and volunteering. The school is open to the public. We have people using the fitness center, walkers in the morning. We have groups that use this facility for their association meetings. We go out and get involved in the different civic organizations. We invite the civic organizations to be a part of the school. So the school district is not just about educating kids, but it's also about giving back to community and making sure that the community knows that this building, this property is here to give back to it. So that's what we try to do.
Just to kind of add on that with, like you said, we haven't seen any formalized opposition, but also like you said, our job here is not to convince anyone to vote yes. Our biggest goal is so that people understand how schools are publicly funded, and that, like we said, this is a 3-year Band-Aid. So we're trying to educate as many people as possible because we will be back in 3 years, I'm assuming, unless something radical changes. And so we want people to just start understanding that it's not mismanagement of funds, it's not increased costs and needing more money. There are other referendums from school districts across the state that are increasing taxes. This one is not. We're fortunate with that debt falling off that we can keep it relatively flat. So we're really just trying to educate as much as possible because you'll be hearing from us again in 3 years, or if it fails, sooner. Those that I had listed that failed, they are coming right back to the next election asking again. They, listen to the public, rephrase how much they're going to ask for, or what way. Again, there's recurring and non-recurring. Recurring is that authority onward. Non-recurring means it falls off. So we wanted a 3-year temporary patch to see what the community thinks of that, if they're willing to support that, and then we'll be back at it again. So it's really a public education point at this point.
Okay, so I just want to know, I'm relatively new to the district, so what are the 5 communities that feed in, or that's part of our...
Sure. Village of Williams Bay, Town of Geneva, Town of Lynn, Town of Delavan, and Town of Walworth.
Okay. And then, do you post your school budgets online? Is there any way to see school budgets?
There is. You'd have to go to DPI. We don't typically put anything out there on the website. We can, that gives people a view to our budget, but typically that's available through the public portal on DPI.
Yep. DPI collects all that data and is usable there.
Go here and I'll come up there.
You're gaining revenue through growth in the village. Is there a cutoff point for new homes. In other words, our home just got done roughly 6 months ago. We paid our first tax bill. Is that going to be locked in, or are we on the cusp of maybe considering being new and our taxes good?
Sure, so two pieces to that. One, your specific home, you're assessed at what the value of your home was on January 1st of that year. So depending where you were at in the construction and completion of your home, that could still go up. But the first part of your question, no, our revenue is not based off of the growth in the community. That impacts the mill rate and how much everyone pays, but how much we collect is how many student-age children live in the district. So additional growth doesn't help us get more money, but it does help how much you pay, because there's more people to pay that bill.
Right. So they could build 100 homes in Williams Bay. That doesn't change our budget at all. The only thing that impacts our budget are the number of children in the community, or again, if the taxpayer gives us the authority to tax up to a certain level by passing the referendum. Okay.
So if you have 100 more homes in the district, no more enrolled students, however, the mill rate then goes down?
Correct. Yep, same with, George Williams, if that gets privatized and comes online as a taxable property, that will help everyone's mill rate and how much they pay, but it does not bring more revenue to the district.
So I got a couple of them. First of all, you stated, the 3 years, $1 million this, $1 million, well, whatever the millions are, right? Is that $4 million?
Well, it's 1.25, 1.5, 1.75. So no, it's only increasing every year because we're asking you to renew that each year.
It's increasing 1.5, 1.25?
No, it's increasing 0.5, 0.75.
Okay, so the first year is
0.5.
Yeah, it's 2.25.
Correct.
Okay, then do you add the next year another 1.5 to that, or are you just adding another 25?
You're adding 250,000.
Okay.
Because otherwise it would drop off, just like it's going to drop off after year 3.
Okay. So in 3 years, you're not getting 4 million, you're asking.
Correct. That's how it stays at that $10 million mark.
Okay.
So there's a nominal increase, but not a full 1.2.
So if you're just trying to stay at the 10 million mark, and then you're saying that you want to give teachers more money, how can you give them more money if you're staying at the same point you are? That doesn't make sense to me.
Yep, that's what she was asking with the debt falling off. So we're going to repurpose 400,000 of money that we used to pay for debt service for principal and interest on a loan that's finishing up. And we'll repurpose that for teachers' wages. But we cannot do that without voter approval as part of this, because we're moving it out of the debt service fund and into the operational fund.
So then, when that what happens when that comes around and you ask the voters for that and they say no, what happens?
For this year?
For any of this. How does that impact this? If you're counting on this $400-some thousand that us voters are going to say, yes, you can have this money to do what you want to with it, or whatever we think you should do with it, how is that going to affect what happens here?
So what I'm understanding your question is, voters vote yes and approve this 3-year question, and then 4 years down the road, what happens? And the voter says, at that time we come back for another referendum and the voters say no. We're going to have to make cuts.
No, that's not what I said.
Okay.
So I think your question, what's built into our budget is continuing wages as is. That debt service money would be giving the raises to help people get to a livable wage before 5 to 10 years.
With that 400,000 that you're hoping that
Correct.
the voters are going to give to you.
Right, so if this fails, we will not be giving additional market increases to our staff.
And we'll be making more reductions.
And we'll need to make reductions as well.
Right, but you're still
balance
you're still banking on this $400-some thousand. Well, they're going to, but it's up to us what they can do with it, and they may not be able to do anything with it. True?
I'm not sure I'm answering.
If this referendum does not pass, we'll operate with a budget around 8.5 million.
Okay, but in the same respect is that you also will have less students, which then, even though the cost per student is more, you're going to have less students. I came from a high school in New Berlin. When I graduated, there was 214, no, I was 214, I was a lackey. There was 250 people in our graduating class. And you guys got 80?
50.
50? And you're running off, I'm an old fart, and what I used to, my father would say, I used to get a Hershey's candy bar this big for 50 cents, and I'm in that position now today too. So, okay, understand. So you spoke a lot about academics and how important this is for the students in the academics, and how good that is for the community, and how good that is for the kids and all that. What I don't know and understand, or what I see it from my side of the world, since I work for Ocean Spray, Cranberry, and I'm a maintenance mechanic on the production line. And you're talking about how it's hard to find, good teachers to do good work and all this other stuff. But at this point, no presentation was there made to state that any of this is going to improve the trades, electrical, plumbing, there's no trades. And this is where these houses that are being built here need these type of people to do it. And I'm telling you, in Ocean Spray, trying to find a maintenance mechanic and qualified that doesn't know even how to change a wheel on his bicycle is a really huge problem. And if there's going to be some increases, it would be good to actually focus a little bit more not on people who can type on computers and want to sit on their butt, but actually get out there and actually perform the things we need for everyday life, such as plumbing, electrical, building houses and stuff. And that wasn't even presented.
I love that you brought that up.
And thank you for bringing that up, because we have an excellent program that are preparing kids for the trades. And I see Mary raising her hand over there because one of her boys is very involved in that program. We've worked really hard. So I mentioned Gateway courses. Gateway is a technical college. So a lot of our kids are going to Gateway to get certifications in HVAC, certifications in welding, electrical, those kinds of pieces. Our industrial tech guy, Jake White, has built a very strong robotics program where they get learning industry and manufacturing to go into a machine shop and work the robots. We do a lot of stuff with CNC work. So we went probably 11 years ago when I came here, almost 95% of our kids going to a 4-year in a college, to now we're seeing many of our kids looking to go to those 2-year programs in the trades and get certified for that. So we're seeing a tremendous growth in that. We do apprenticeships where kids are actually going out and working in the field. So we have one young man who works for Shodine Builders. We have another one that's doing HVAC with Comfort Heating. So they're out there doing those kinds of things.
I would invite you to come take a tour of our tech ed room. It will knock your socks off. Mr. White, not Dr. White, Jacob White, our tech ed director, he got grants from the state as well as business partnerships to help chip in for some equipment. There are people, students that can actually be certified, is it welding or mechanics? I don't know the
They're getting certified in
that
welding.
They're actually able to have certifications before they graduate high school through the equipment that we have and through the program through the state that Mr. White has enrolled us in. But definitely come check out our construction and tech ed department. It's
You'd be amazed at the things the kids are doing to get into the trades. I mean, it's not just about AP courses and those things, so I can attest to that. Other questions?
A couple of things. Could you go back to the slide where you show the mill rates for the next couple of years? And just maybe go through that again one more time. The way I interpret this is the mill rate with this not being approved goes down quicker than it does if it is approved.
correct.
Is that the basic nut of that?
Correct. Yep, because that debt is falling off and because of the membership of the community going down, we will not be able to collect as much without voter approval. So you will see a significant drop, or you can elect to forgive some of that tax relief and keep us funded at the same level.
And then, given the fact that there appears to be a dropping in school-age kids across not only our village, but every village around here, at what point does the conversation start to happen about reducing the number of high schools in the area? Does that start now? I mean, again, in 3 years, if you're going to come back and ask for additional funding for a dwindling asset, I think that's a tough sell. Just curious if those conversations have started.
Yeah, and that name is consolidation. And so certainly we've had a little bit of conversation about consolidation, and we certainly understand that some people would do that. Consolidation for this district is a little bit of a challenge because when you consolidate, you're combining with another district. So the closest one to us would be Bigfoot. Well, they're a 9-12 Union High School district and then a series of K-8 districts. So we'd either have to split and become a K-8 and combine with one of those K-8s and then combine with the high, so it gets complicated. Otherwise, we're looking toward Delavan or Elkhorn. So that makes some of the complications. And again, people in Williams Bay love their school, and there are certain districts they would not want to combine with and certain districts they might be okay with, but so it gets very, very complicated. The other part of that ends up being just because you combine doesn't mean your taxes are going to go down. They could go up depending on how much debt the other district has, and you're absorbing their debt and they're absorbing ours.
But real quick,
Yep.
both districts need to accept consolidating. We have a ton of lake frontage in Williams Bay that's actually not taxable. So that is not advantageous to the combining district. Again, like he said, you have to take on each other's debt, so depending which school that we partner with. But yes, we've had those conversations, but also what we're doing is called a 6603 agreement, and that's where we can actually share staff between districts. They share me with Woods. I help them with their business manager. We have a speech pathologist that we share with Woods. We had a science teacher we shared with Bigfoot. So that's an opportunity to share as much staff as we can between districts. But both districts need to want to take on the other school.
So, again, we will do everything we can to control costs. We share resources with other districts. We'll just keep reducing and doing what we have to do to try to make sure we're as efficient as possible. There you go, Sam.
Couple questions. One, when you bring up consolidation, is that something that would come to referendum? Is that a decision that is made at the board level, or is that a decision that's made at the administration and board level, or is that something, because I think you're going to get a lot of opinions on that, as it affects people, obviously, that have children more than people that don't.
It's primarily made at the board level.
So that would not be
the boards have to work together. So it doesn't go to an election, but certainly, ultimately, where the community speaks to whether they want to consolidate is, again, if you're not going to approve the referendums, then eventually that
Right.
becomes on the table.
That kind of becomes the vote for that
Yeah.
occasion. And then I want to get clear too on what kind of how you're kind of hamstrung by this, the way this is funded. Are you only able to levy to a certain point, but they're still not giving you that gap? But you can't, what if you wanted, I mean, don't run me out on a rail. What if you wanted more? Is that a possibility? You have a cap, but in the same time, they're not giving you. So you're kind of on both ends of this deal. You're kind of, am I reading that correctly? At both ends
Correct.
of the deal, you're kind of hamstrung.
And again, in meeting with Steve Nass, our senator,
Yeah.
if you want more, this is what you do. You go to referendum.
Okay.
You cannot exceed it without going to a referendum.
Oh, yeah, that would make sense. Okay, thank you.
Even kind of property tax rate?
No,
You have to, even a property tax adjustment, you have to show up for
correct.
Yeah, because property taxes are backdated in a lot of things, especially with a community that's aging, with retirees who aren't fixed incomes.
Yeah.
It's going to be a challenge. You're going to tax people out of their homes eventually.
Well, and again, that's why we keep, when we have conversation about, we are trying to take care of our employees, but we also recognize that we have to be very efficient and manage our money very wisely. So again, henceforth, why we're already making cuts. We didn't come to the public and just say, well, give us 1.5 million more, and we won't make any cuts. We are still trying to reduce and be fiscally responsible because we realize this puts a burden on the taxpayer. But ultimately, if we want to maintain a high-quality school district, this is what we feel we need to do.
But that's exactly it, is you paid us this exact same amount this year. So we're just asking you to pay it again next year. So it's not running you out on taxes currently, I understand the long-term issues too, but, and that's, again, like he said, the state legislators. What? And, yeah, I mean, the state legislators, they have determined that this is the solution to the problem. So that's why we don't see a fix in the short term.
So I'm a rather slow individual. Bear with me, I'll repeat a question. If I understand it correctly, our taxes will not go up. So if we survived this year, we'll survive the next 3 years because our tax rate is going to go down. It's just how much lower it's going to go. When we talk about consolidation or what will happen 4 years from now, well, then there's a range of options available to us, and we could cross that bridge when it comes. I think I was looking at some statistics around educational performance, especially math achievement at high school level. And I believe Williams-Bayes is one of the top schools in the state for doing that. I think it still is, actually, in terms of high school math achievement. So if we look at consolidation, we're talking about pretty significant academic impacts to the negative if we consolidate with another school. So at least for the first 3 years, this seems like a much cheaper way to move forward than, say, hiring tutors, et cetera, right? Okay.
And again, the mill rate is going down. We can't project when any of those 5 municipalities will do a community-wide revaluation. If you build onto your home, if you sell your home or buy a home, your value matches your sale price. So the mill rate will be dropping. If everything stays status quo, taxes will go down for most homeowners.
You know, and again, Jennifer mentioned earlier, recurring and non-recurring referendums. A lot of districts go to what they call a recurring referendum. So they basically ask for $1 million a year into perpetuity. The board was very cognizant of the fact that our taxpayers, you know, we're putting a big impact on our taxpayers. We don't know what's going to happen in 4 years. So the board felt like 3 years, let's put it out there. We take care of the 3 years. We'll see what happens with that next biannual budget. And then we go to the taxpayers with a clear picture of where we're at and what we need. Again, we're asking for what we need and not just throwing out a figure. And that's why we're being pretty conservative on that. Yes. Yeah. Certainly, we try to, again, share our administrative cost. We've run pretty lean on that. We have a business manager, which is Jennifer, a superintendent. We have the 2 principals. We've also got an associate principal. We will try to reduce those. Our associate principal is a part teacher, a part administrator. So we certainly have reduced those as well. But right now, again, those are pieces that's what we have. And we're looking to try to share those with other districts.
Hate to bring back this mill rate thing, but I'm still confused on this. If the mill rate goes down and all you guys are asking for is a bigger share of the pie, correct?
No, we're asking for the pizza to stay the same. There'll be more people cutting up a slice of it.
Okay,
We're
so
not asking for more
you have
money.
this pie, right? And you need X amount of percentage of that pie to operate. And you're asking for 1.5 million to an additional piece of that pie.
No, so this year you paid for a medium pie. Next year we're asking for a medium pie, not a large pizza, a medium pizza, just the same. But we've invited 10 more people to the table to split the bill of that medium pie.
Right, so you're going to...
So we're not asking...
So the money that you're asking for is going to obstruct what the other people are going to be able to use for their programs or municipalities or anything else.
No, the state is requiring that we order a small pizza for everyone. And we're just asking you to keep us at a medium pizza.
Yeah, and again, when you look at your tax bill, you'll see the Village of Williams Bay, the Gateway Technical, the Walworth City, and then Walworth County. Each tax is a little bit different, so it's not like, well, if we get 30% of the pie and we only had 20% this year, we'll get 30% next year, so the village only gets their percentage go. That's not how it works. It does not work where it's 100% pie and everybody gets a slice of it. That's not how funding works at all. Because how they tax different. So like, for example, our tax bill went down this year from the school side, and the village went up because they passed the EMS referendum. So how they tax all operates independently. You had a question.
What's the rate for an open enrolled student as opposed to
So we get
membership?
approximate numbers. We get about $12,000 per student in our district, resident student. I just saw a figure on this, which is why I'm going to say it, but when he said that they haven't kept up with inflation of the per pupil amount and how they kept it flat for 2 years, they said we're about $3,300 per student behind in inflation since 2009. So we get $12,000-ish per student. If they choose to open and enroll out and go somewhere else, they take $8,000 of that with them to their new school. And then if they come here from another school, we get $8,000 from that other school. So even if a student living in Williams Bay chooses to go to Bigfoot, we still keep $4,000 of that funding from them.
There's an incentive. There's an incentive in the sense that if we have 20 seats, say, for first grade, and we've got 16 resident kids, if we can bring 4 in-district ones and fill those seats up, that's what we want to do.
But we do turn them away before they cause an additional classroom requiring an additional teacher.
You do have that option to refuse it.
Yep.
We cap. So the board says at first grade, we take 36 kids. So they set that each year because obviously we don't want to just take whoever applies and now all of a sudden we have to add a whole additional classroom and a whole additional staff member. So that's again how we control our costs.
And we have about double the number of students coming in than going out, which results in the $1 million to the good from filling those extra seats.
So given the challenge of open enrollment, how do you guys go out and market all the great things you told us about that the high school is doing, the grade school is doing, to get kids that are not necessarily in our district or not necessarily in Williams Bay to the school?
We do put up banners. We do some advertising, but ultimately, word of mouth. Our parents, again, I would say they're happy with what their education their kids get, and they have friends and people out there, and that's where they come from. This district has had a tremendous reputation. So again, we turn kids away each year.
And we give tours year-round to potential families when people are kind of shopping around, deciding where they want to go or if they're unsatisfied where they currently are.
To that point about open enrollment, I've got 2 kids. We open enroll into this school district. What sold us on it was word of mouth, but also the statistics that we talk about. Hey, great high school math performance, great graduation rates, small class sizes, that type of thing.
I think I can explain to you the mill rate. You said you were confused. So the mill rate is the percentage that each homeowner is paying for this. And because there's been growth in the community, that's why our mill rate's going down from 2023. You saw on the chart there it's going down. It was 7.25. Now it's going to be 5 point, I don't remember the number. And a lot of things factor into it, but one of the big factors is people are moving into the community, plus people who have had homes here are adding to their home, expanding their home, which means their home has now a greater value on the tax roll. So they're paying a higher percentage of that tax than they were before. For example, we had a very small fishing cottage on our home. We knocked it down and we built our retirement home. Our taxes tripled in 2 years' time since COVID. So that's how the mill rate's going down.
True, but I have a house here, and I'm in the EPC zone for Williams Bay, which means I have to take to the residents. I have to vote on the referendum for the police staff, right? So I have that to work with on my end too. But I had the same situation as you did, and they increased my home by 130%. So now they increased the bill rate, and I got the same tax rate, or tax per year, right?
No.
down for now, right? But in 4 years, if it keeps up, as they need other monies and stuff, your mill rate may be going down, but because you owe more, or they figure your house is worth more, your taxes are gonna go up. And I have to think about that as well as having to worry about the referendum for, the police,
Sure. The town of Geneva.
what do you call it? The public safety referendum for Williams Bay. So, I'm gonna be I'm retiring, like a lot of you would look like I'm in the retirement age. It's a little bit stiff to start, handing out money. I'd like to have, 2 new cars, we need 2 new cars, but you know what? I can only afford one right now.
Yeah. And that's the town of Geneva is where that safety referendum is at on the ballot. That's not Williams Bay. So,
And that is, I'm in the ETZ for Williams Bay in the college.
right. So again, like going to talk about earlier, if the referendum passes for the school district, your taxes for the school may go down, but if your referendum for the safety passes, your town of Geneva taxes may go up.
Right, you don't pay taxes to the village of Williams Bay. Your top line is to the town of Geneva. But just to say, so when the value of the community, whether it's for the district purposes or the municipality's purposes, when they do a revaluation, you only pay more taxes if your value of your home went up more than the average of the community. So when I say the community went up 22%, that does not mean that everyone's paying 22% more in taxes. That means if your property went up 30%, yes, you're paying more taxes. But if you live in a home or a part of the town or whatever that's less desirable than the average for whatever reason, you could pay less even though the value of the community went up. So it's not if one goes up, the other goes up. With the revaluation, it's just dividing who gets what size of piece of pizza out of that pie. They want to make sure that people are paying for the right size share. I feel like I'm losing people, but yeah, if your house goes up more than the average, you pay more. If it goes less than the average, you can pay less, even though the value of the community went up.
One of the things that kind of has been alluded to is the fact that we do have people coming into our communities. There's growth, but there's not in the schools, our school. So that's the concern that I have. What is going to be done, and why is it? Why is that? Why is it that people want to go out of the district and go to Badger or whatever? There has to be a reason.
I can answer. Okay, and again, certainly we see kids that want to go to another school. I mean, I'll take it, again, I've been here for 11 years. Mark may have started here in first grade. Sometimes kids just need a bigger environment. They've been with the same kids for 10 years. They've had a change in friendships. They felt like they might have a better chance at, Badger High School. You have some kids that want a different experience from athletics. They want to be on a Division I basketball team versus a Division VI basketball team. So some of those factors draw kids out. But again, like we've said before, there are lots of factors that draw kids in. We get a lot more kids coming in than we see going out. So all of our schools in the state experience open enrollment out. You just can't avoid it. But the question is, are you a winner or are you a loser in open enrollment? And we're a big winner. That's just a mere fact.
And we're seeing
Purchase homes in towns other than Williams Bay because they're more affordable. They cost less. I mean, Williams Bay homes cost a lot comparatively because it's a pretty nice area to live in and it's near the lake. And so that's why the people moving in, at least in our neighborhood, the new faces I see are not young families. They're people who are retired or close to retirement age. Their kids are already grown and out of the school district. That's who's moving in, which is why you lose students living in the district from what I can tell.
Yeah.
What is the enrollment, the current enrollment?
We're right around 680 kids. So I'd say when I came here 11 years ago, we're right about where it was 11 years ago. The high school about 3 years ago peaked about 230. So it always has worked in a bit of a cycle for this community. So my hope certainly is that it will level out and eventually go back up. But again, when you're seeing $1,000 homes or more, young families buying homes in this community, it's a challenge. You are not going to see, teachers, policemen, firemen, people like that buying homes in this community unless they have a dual income family. I mean, it's just the nature of the situation here.
But we're seeing declining enrollment statewide. You're seeing it in all these communities. So it's not necessarily that we're losing to Elkhorn or to Bigfoot or wherever, but just people are waiting longer to have kids. There are plenty of 30 and 40-year-olds that are choosing not to have children at all. That's affecting us, but obviously the property values is paramount.
How many of them are not residents?
Used to be, I don't know what its percentage, used to be about 25% were open enrolled.
So what is the ideal class size per teacher? And I have another question too.
Okay, let me answer that.
Go ahead.
Ideal class size, in Williams Bay, we run between 18 and around 18, 20 per classroom. When we look at some of the neighboring districts, they're running anywhere from 25 to 30. So the ideal class size, I think, is right about where we're at. So we're not running too small. There were times when we ran with 15 kids and sometimes a few less, but right now, the sweet spot right now is at 18 to 20, and that's where we're trying to run those classrooms, because when we feel like good learning can take place in those rooms, and it also is a level that it keeps us economically efficient. I'm getting my steps in tonight.
Hi, I just wanted to support what you were saying earlier about the open enrolled students, because I live here in Williams Bay, and I have 2 6-year-olds in kindergarten here, and 2 of my really good friends both live in Lake Geneva, and their children have open enrolled here. And they both say the same thing. They say, we really loved this school, and we wanted to be here, but we couldn't afford to have homes as young families here. And I will say, one of those friends of mine toured every single school in the area, and she thought that Williams Bay seemed like a great place, and she spoke to all the principals, and she was just really impressed with this school, and my family has been as well, and so I know that it can be hard for younger families trying to if they want to live here, it can be hard for them. So,
Well, and again, I'm just going to say that, I've only been here 11 years, but this community is what it is because of the school being a big part of that. It has made your home values what they are because people have come here, they have raised their families here, many of them have returned to raise their families here. The village and the school board working together have maintained a great environment that people want to come and live in. And so that has been really blessed. That's why people want to come and live in this community. And certainly the house gets by the person with the most money. That's just the way it is. Go ahead. There's something on it? Anything else?
Over here.
Could you go back to that bar graph that we were looking at earlier with the, so just again, with the mill rate, sorry guys.
This one?
In 2023, 2024, we were at about $10 million in revenue, right? Now we're going to be down to what? It looks like almost 9.
It's like 8.5.
8.5 in 2024, 2025. Is that because the mill rate it's going down or projected to go down?
That's the funding formula. So the
Okay.
funding formula allowed us 10 million this year. It's going down to 8.5
This might be a
million
question
next year.
for-
The mill rate doesn't have anything to do with our budget. It's only
This is funding
what
formula.
share you pay.
So why are we getting less a year after 2024? That doesn't make sense. I know that the referendum is to compensate for that.
So the funding formula, trying not to get too far into the weeds, but it's based off of a 3-year rolling average of that membership. So we're about 200 students down in the number of students living in our district. As Dr. White said, there was 80 students we lost in 1 year during COVID. So as that falls off, now we're seeing I'm trying to keep it simple, but like we're seeing less through that funding formula of what we're allowed to levy.
So without the blue lines is what happens without the referendum. So you're going to see that it's not going to increase as much from 24 to 25 to 25, 26, but it's still going to decrease. So ultimately with the referendum, you see the orange lines, we're trying to keep it pretty steady.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, we were able to push that off using those ESSER funds. Those were one-time COVID relief funds that people, again, it was supposed to be used for helping mitigate COVID in the classroom and learning loss, but most districts have ended up using it to balance their budget to push off this fiscal cliff. Oh yeah, absolutely.
The first year we put what they called air ionization. So that was put in the first year. During those early years, the early part of the COVID, certainly putting in different things to keep kids separated and just keep the illness.
The partitions.
Yeah, correct. I won't deny that. But what the state legislature did is said, well, you're getting money from the federal government. We're not going to give you any money for these 2 years of the biennial budget. So it's sort of, we all got smacked around, I guess is the best way I can put it. So we're all doing the best we can with what we got. That's just simple fact.
That's true. When during COVID, when they did 2 years of zero per pupil increase, they never made up for that drop, which then puts us behind.
The other question I had was, you're basing the 10 million over the next 3 years. Is that assuming inflation stays where it's at now or reduces?
No, we've continued to project increased costs. That's why, again, we know that our costs are going to continue to go up. So you see a little bit of increase in those little orange lines, but not much. We're going to continue to try to control our cost.
The inflation rate is the projected inflation rate.
Right, but in our budget model, we're projecting increases in our insurance, increases in our utilities, all those kinds of things. Correct.
Is there a plan to increase revenue, like, in the future? And by that I mean your own students or anything like that, or just kind of happenstance of whoever lives in your business?
Well, certainly we're going to try to maximize every seat in our classrooms. We want to make sure we bring that revenue in. Certainly, again, if you increase class sizes, you're going to try to maximize revenue because you're going to try to fill those seats with people. Certainly, again, other than your funding formula, there's no other way to really increase revenues unless you start really increasing fees and increasing charges to the community and those kinds of things.
We do seek out grants, which we'll continue to do so too. We've gotten some mental health grants, some tech ed equipment grants, those kind of things. We'll definitely try to offset our costs so that that's not coming out of that limited or fixed income piece.
You would have to talk to the village trustees.
We did. You can too.
And again, I know the village said a lot of conversation about that. But if you own property in Williams Bay, you're the developer, you're not doing that. So they certainly understand that. Yeah. Yeah, I've been in some of the meetings with the village trustees, and when they were doing some of their planning, there's a lot of argument over affordable housing and that kind of stuff. You'd have to go to them and really talk to those guys. But again, this is a beautiful community, and people want to be here, and so they're willing to pay top dollar to be a part of this community, and we know that.
That's what I was going to say too.
Well, if the numbers of the kids go down, again, it's certainly consolidation, or if there are no kids, then yeah, there's no school.
Well, and don't forget, it's the community that paid for this school to be built. I mean, the community invested in this property to make us what we are today, and it's working. What you guys chose to do is working. We're a school of choice. We're bringing people in from other districts. This is just the next step of...
Right, and the village talks about where it's going. You're having the development here where George Williams is going to be sold. You've got what's going on with the Women's Center. You've got what's going on with Yerkes. A big part of those kind of things happening is because of the quality community that is here, and again, the school's a big part of that. So certainly, I believe maintaining a first-class education is becoming an integral part of that first-class community. Go ahead. So we get monies, the funding formula, so the base of our funding is on the number of school-age kids that live in our school attendance area, which is comprised of those 5 municipalities. Correct. And then we also get monies when we invite kids in from other districts. We get money from that.
But we also pay out for students that's that 8,000 and 4,000. So we get our tax money, through the funding formula in January, February, and August when you pay your taxes. But then every year at the end of the year, they look at how many open enrolled in, how many open enrolled out, and also vouchers. We pay vouchers to Faith Christian at about $60,000 a year to go there. So you kind of settle up at the end of the year of who gets what share of the pie. But all of that is separate from what we're restricted to levy from taxpayers.
That's almost all. That 8.5 million's basically all tax monies we receive because of the students we have. That 8.5 million is all the monies we receive from the taxpayer for the number of kids we have in the district. No.
I'm sorry, I was listening. What was the question?
Is the million we get for the kids coming in addition to the 8.5 million? Or is 8.5 just our budget, right?
How is the money we get for the kids in the geographical area different than the money we get from the enrollment?
So it's an in and an out at the end of the year so when we do our pupil counts twice throughout the year, we report how many students have come in, everyone else reports how many have left. We have to reconcile every single student in the area. Then we get a net payment between the two.
I think the question is that money included in the $8.5 million?
No.
That's in addition to what gets allocated to the tax.
Correct. Like if we didn't have enough students enrolling in and we had more outs than ins, then it would come out of that 10 million.
So is that $10,000, $50,000, $100,000 on any given year? I think that's what you're trying to do.
I'm getting confused.
I'm getting confused too as well. The net is $1 million we received this year to the good.
Because our total operating budget's 10 million this year. No, we levied 10 million.
Funding formula, the levy is 10 million. That doesn't include athletic fees, grants received.
So our total operating budget then is
over that.
Is over that.
Correct.
Okay. So the 8.5 million is what we get from the state for the students that live in Williams Bay. Then let's say at the end of the year, we send out a check for $500,000 to all the other districts, and we get a check for basically $1 million back. Then we're operating on about a $9 million budget. We get additional revenues beyond that. So our budget's operating right around 11 million this year, I'm going to assume.
And that 10 million mark also includes like our debt service. We have different funds that we have to keep money separately, again, to try to stay out of the weeds. But yes, that includes, that's, part of that drop is that that debt payoff as well as part of that $1.25 million drop, which is again why we're asking to repurpose those funds to pay additional costs.
Yeah, right now we have about 680 kids. I think about 530 are in district. So about 130 maybe. So about 25% come through open enrollment.
So if we look down the road long term, let's say 5 years, 10 years down the road, and the home value prices in Williams Bay continue to go up at an astronomical pace. We don't have enough families moving in. That 75% of Williams Bay kids enrolling in our schools will continue to decrease, and you're going to be more and more relying on other districts that kids here. At what point do we become consultants where we don't have kids here to support that extra?
Yeah, and I couldn't answer that. And again, that was where the conversations about consolidation and stuff would start to pick up. If we just don't have kids to support a school, then certainly consolidation becomes a big piece of that. But
I don't want to, I'm going to vote yes, okay, I'm going to vote yes for this, but I don't want the solution to always be, we have to continue to have a referendum because that 75-25 starts to shift, and it gets closer to 50, and now it's 25-75, and the only solution we have
yeah.
have referendums to make up that.
Yeah, and again, as taxpayers, I think they all agree with you as far as not wanting to see that shift and then now, and keep coming back for money. One, we're going to continue to be fiscally responsible as we can. That's the job of the board, to make sure we're spending our monies the correct way. But I will tell you, we're going to keep coming back for referendums because that's the system that has been set up. When you talk to Steve Nash is going to tell you that's what we expect. Schools are controlled by the local taxpayer. We have shifted money back to the local taxpayer from the state level. If you want your schools to have money, then you need to vote for that. But certainly, again, if it gets to the point, it's 75% open enrollment and 25% in district, which is what I think you're talking about, certainly that's when the board's going to have to make some really critical decisions about what's right for the community. They're elected by you guys, and it's their job to listen to what the taxpayer is saying and act accordingly. But right now, we're going to continue to fight for what we have and continue to maintain the district the best we can.
It sounds like we're gonna, I'm gonna vote yes as well, that's just so you guys know. But it sounds like we're voting on a 3-year Band-Aid and waiting to see what happens with the state funding.
Yeah, and our board's approach is let's do it in short increments. Again, other districts, they would tell me, Bill, you're nuts as a superintendent. You should be going for a 5. You should be going for a 10. You should be going for a recurring. Our board knows our community and knows that we need to look at it in small increments and really respond accordingly. And that's what they want to do.
I mean, I live in Fontana, and they're on like their third, they're preparing for their 3rd referendum cycle. And we've been trained in Fontana of, the referendum is expiring, time to renew. And again, that dollar amount may change, but it really is, this is not us asking, I mean, it kind of is, but it's not us asking the voters to come to our rescue. It's now we're coming to you with the need of the district's budget that we feel our school board has felt that this is an appropriate funding level, and now it's the voters that need to ratify if that's okay or if it needs to be adjusted. But this is the solution moving forward.
In Lake Geneva, they went to a recurring referendum 2 years ago. And if you know Lake Geneva, they're going back to referendum this year. So they're building a referendum on top of a recurring referendum. So it's just the nature of what's going on in the landscape for funding for school districts, and that's just the way it is. But again, I know the expectation of the community is that we live within our means as best we can, and certainly we're trying to do that. Like I said, we'll continue to make reductions. If we have to do administration, we'll do administration. We know what the taxpayer expects, and they expect strong fiscal management, and that's what we're trying to do. So we try to make sure we spend every dollar wisely. Jim.
A little off the subject, but is this situation unique to our school?
The decline enrollment is not unique, but how schools are funded in Wisconsin is different than it is in other places. So some states might be similar. Every state's different, I guess is what I'd say. So, and I know some states rely on referendums and some states don't. So referendums in Illinois, they don't exist. They don't do referendums in Illinois as far as I know.
They also can't open enroll, correct, in Illinois?
We had a friend who called us today who said, and
Yeah. Yeah. And again, we know as school officials, as school board members, that's what we don't want. But as far as beyond that, you need to talk to your legislatures on the rest of it. So. Well, thank you guys for your time. If you have additional questions, feel free to come up and ask. You can email me, call me, stop by. We're here to answer your questions. But thank you so much for coming out.
I think that there needs to be a better educating of us, the voters, on what a referendum is and how that all works out in your description of how a referendum of millions of dollars doesn't affect the mill rate or your taxes. I think that's the stumbling block that you have. If they can educate us better when asking for referendums, we'll have a better.
And we've had articles in the community newsletter, and we'll continue to do so. So we'll definitely continue that education effort. So check those.